They say that beauty is only skin deep, and 3 years ago I was given good reason to believe that. These events happened in September 2021. It was the worst year of my life. I'd been going hunting with Ethan and Joe every year for as long as I could remember. We grew up together in a small town in West Virginia where hunting was a part of everyday life. As the years went by, we'd naturally gone our separate ways. But every autumn, come hell or high water, we'd take a week's vacation and go hunting. For the past few years, we'd been spreading our wings and venturing outside our home state. The year before it was in Wyoming. But in 2021 we chose Alabama. We were in our 30s. I was married with 2 kids. Ethan had 3. But Joe still hadn't found what he was looking for, although it sure wasn't for a lack of trying. We picked up our hired pickup from the airport and drove about 30 miles to a tiny backwoods town, where we got the keys and directions to a log cabin up in the hills, that would be our home for the next 5 days. We shopped for the bare essentials, which was mostly beer, and then we headed for our new home. It was another long drive in hilly country, but it gave us the chance to wind down and get in the right frame of mind for the trip ahead. We hadn't been able to spend any time together over the past year, and it felt good to be back with my 2 best friends. The cabin was small, with 2 bunk beds in one room and a double in the other. Joe won the toss and took the double. Ethan and I both called home to check in, and Joe called his latest fling to make sure she'd still be there when he got back. We fixed dinner, drank a few beers, and then got an early night. The sun was shining bright the next day and we decided to start the week with some fishing, before getting into the serious hunting. We found a deep stream and spent the day watching fish swim nonchalantly past our baited hooks. I did catch 3 fish, but none of them were big enough to eat. Joe didn't get a bite all day. I guess his mind was still on the girl he left back home. Lucky for us, Ethan was having a good day, so dinner that night was assured. Driving back along a winding track, we came across a vision that was right out of Hollywood. As we rounded a bend, I nearly drove straight into a princess on horseback. Luckily, she was an excellent rider and she swerved out of the way just in time. We pulled up and got out and she reined in her mount. "Hey, city boys, you're going way too fast," she said. "Sorry ma'am, honest to God." "We beg for your forgiveness," said Joe, bending down on one knee and sweeping his hat theatrically. "You had to give it to him, the boy never missed an opportunity." "Okay, I guess I'll forgive you," said the princess with a smile that would melt the heart of any man. "Thank you ma'am. My name's Joe, and these boys are my 2 happily married friends, Ethan and Jed." We laughed at his cheek. "He ain't married 'cause there ain't no woman would have him." "So tell me," said Joe, "why is a beautiful lady like you riding around all on her own? Ain't your man worried he might lose you?" The princess laughed. "Only man in my life is my old daddy, and he knows I'd never leave him on his own." Joe beamed with glee. "Well, I'd sure like to meet the man responsible for bringing a beautiful maiden like you into this world." We groaned at his clumsy approach. "Well, maybe you just might one day," said the princess. "I suppose you boys are in the Faulkner cabin, so we're pretty much neighbors. Daddy and I live about 1.5 miles further up the track. So I dare say we'll see each other again." With that, she kicked her horse, spun him round and galloped off. You can probably guess the main subject of conversation over fried fish and beer at dinner that evening. The next morning we were going hunting. But Joe said he didn't feel up to it, feigning a gastric upset. We knew that the gastric upset was a certain beautiful princess he hoped might just come riding by. I guess you have different priorities when you're 35 and still single. We drove off, saying that we'd honk our horns to warn him when we returned, just in case he was on the john, or on something else. We got back mid-afternoon and the cabin was empty. We set about cleaning the 2 rabbits and the wild turkey we'd shot, expecting Joe to walk in any second and make us jealous with tales of his manly deeds. But Joe didn't come back that night. We drank a lot of beer, ate rabbit stew and went to bed. He wasn't back when we got up the next day either. But we were in the mood for hunting, so we left him a jokey note on the kitchen table and headed off. We got back late in the afternoon and Joe still wasn't there. It was getting dark and Ethan was beginning to worry. "It's funny that he hasn't called. Think we should go look for him?" I said I wouldn't worry too much about Joe. He's like a dog that's found itself a bitch on heat. I figure he'll be back when he's tired of doing what he's doing. An hour or so later, Ethan tried to call him on the phone. There was no answer. He waited half an hour and tried again, still nothing. "I've got an uneasy feeling," he said. "Let's take a drive up to that cowgirl's place, just to make sure he's there. But if he ain't, then something's wrong." We drove up the track for almost 2 miles and came across a rundown old shack in a clearing off the road. It didn't look like anybody lived there, so we drove on for at least 2 more miles. "There's nothing else up here. Maybe she lives in that old shack we passed. Looks like a funny palace for a princess," I said. We pulled up close to the shack and Ethan hit the horn a couple of times. He noticed a sudden movement in the woods just behind the cabin and got out of the pickup.
"Hey, stay there. You see that guy? Big fella, but kinda hunched over. Wearing a hoodie so I couldn't see his face. He just ran off into the woods."
I had to admit that I hadn't seen anybody. We drove back to the cabin, ate some more rabbit stew and drank a little more beer. From time to time, Ethan tried to call Joe, but he never answered.
"Jed, I'm worried now. I didn't like the look of that guy. Kinda mean and evil looking. Let's take another drive up the track and take a look. Bring your gun."
We drove almost 10 miles, but we didn't come across a house or even a cabin. There was just the old shack we'd passed earlier. On the way back down we stopped and got out. I grabbed a flashlight and Ethan picked up the rifle. We walked towards the door, calling Joe's name. Everything was still. Suddenly an old owl hooted from a tree nearby. Ethan swirled round and almost shot at it. "Hey, calm down. You're too jumpy," I said. We climbed the 2 steps to the porch and Ethan knocked on the door. It opened slightly. "I don't think anybody lives here," I said. He gave the door a push and it opened. I shined the flashlight inside.
"Oh my God, it's Joe."
Our pal's dismembered naked body was lying in a pool of blood on a dirty old mattress in the middle of the room. His throat had been slit and his genitalia had been cut off. I retched and had to go outside to throw up. We called the police and they showed up pretty quick. At first, they seemed to suspect Ethan and me. They took us back to the police station. They interviewed us separately, to make sure we were both telling the same story, I guess. Ethan told them about the guy in the hoodie, but I had to admit that I hadn't seen him myself. The detective interviewing us was specially interested in the details of the lady we'd met on horseback. That was easy enough, 'cause she was a real beauty. I said they surely must know her, because there couldn't be more than one like her around those parts. Eventually, we were taken into the detective's own office. "I'm going to show you a picture and I want you to tell me if that's the woman you met," he said. He rummaged in a filing cabinet and took out the front page of a newspaper. It was folded in half and he showed us the photograph on the front page. We both shouted at once, "That's her." The detective laid the newspaper flat on his desk in front of us. We looked at it in disbelief. The newspaper was dated 1957. We read the article, which described the murder of a young local lady and her father. They'd both been savagely killed in their own home in the woods. The lady had also been raped. "Your friend is the 3rd victim," said the detective. "The other 2 were found in the same area, in the same condition. We never found out who did it." I asked him about the guy in the hoodie, and he said they would be looking into it. A couple of months went by and the detective called me. He said that they'd got nowhere with their investigation and they hadn't been able to find the guy Ethan had seen. It looked like Joe's killing was going to go unpunished and it still remains a mystery to this day. So what do you think? Could the assassin really be the ghost of that pretty lady on the horse, getting revenge for the rape and the savage murder of her and her pa? Or was it the guy in the hoodie Ethan saw roaming around the woods that night? Let us know in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more from the dark side, please leave a like, and subscribe to our channel.